Hello, Dr. Hines.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, good. Okay. Ivan, let's introduce the show. Simon said start. Ivan,
Yes, sir. You
go ahead
ready to
and
go?
start. Simon said start.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Black Health Trust. I would like to turn our program today over to our founder, Dr. Randall Maxey.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ivan Walks, and thank our other co-moderator, Dr. Jocelyn Hines, our fourth co-moderator, Dr. Barbara Davis Stevens, is on the continent of Europe right now. And I have a program that I want to speak about, and we're going to open the mic so we can discuss it. And this is something that I'm actually talking to myself about, but it's based upon two very recent experiences that I've had. One is a 22-year-old female who had a history of lupus and lupus nephritis. And on her physical exam, her blood pressure was slightly elevated. She had protein in her urine, and she had decreasing renal failure. And she was under the care of a rheumatologist at Cedar Sinai. And I then saw her in my office brought by her father, who was a prominent musician. Of course, I can't identify by name, but uh, unfortunately, she went on tour. And I got word that she had invited her entire family to a family reunion to happen on Christmas this coming week. And she expired day before yesterday. The second was a patient of mine that had been a patient for more than 30 years. And he was extremely secretive because of the industry he had been involved in prior. His medical problems were that he was obese, he had chronic kidney disease, he had a renal function of about 30%. He was being treated for high blood pressure, and he was on weight loss drugs and had been successful in losing about 15 to 20 pounds so far. He had a hernia operation last week, an uncomplicated operation, but he went home, and I got a call from a sister of his. She couldn't get through to him by phone. I had a call from a female friend of his, and she couldn't get through by phone. And I advised her to call the police and the paramedics and break the door down. They found that he was unconscious on the floor. He ended up having a blood glucose of about 30. The paramedics put an IV in and gave him glucose and took him to the emergency room at a local hospital. And subsequently, he was rushed to the ICU, was found to be have high potassium and kidney failure, and ended up having a collapsed lung. And he expired. And in both of these cases, there was no one of record to make decisions for these individuals. And I want to speak today about no matter how young you are, how old you are, end of life decisions preferably should be made while you still have your orientation about you. So Simon, if we can show the first slide, and I'd like my co-moderators to talk through this with me. I did send you a set of slides. Simon, can you show the first one? Looks like all of my computers not working well today.
Okay, we can see the first slide, Dr. Maxey.
Okay. So we're going to talk about understanding advanced directives and living wills. And this is defined as, if you can roll it up next slide. So we'll explore the need and the importance of these legal documents and guidelines of how to create your own plan. And we want to discuss the benefits of having these documents in place. Next slide. So an advance directive is a legal document that allows an individual to outline their preferences for their medical care as they become, if they become unable to communicate or make decisions for themselves. The advanced directives can include instructions for medical treatments, life support decisions, end of life care, organ donation, and living will is one type of an advanced directive. Next slide. So a living will is actually a written statement that details your wishes about life-sustaining medical treatments, even when if you're terminally ill or cannot wake up, if you're permanently in a vegetative state. It typically outlines whether or not you wish to receive life-prolonging treatments, like a ventilator and CPR, which is pulmonary resuscitation, and decisions about artificial nutrition and hydration, and any other specific thing. Now, contrary to what many people think, being on a ventilator, having a tube put down your throat is not comfortable at all. And you can't really protest. In many cases, if you have a locked-in syndrome, you can't even blink your eyes. You can't tell anybody not to. It can be extremely uncomfortable. And it's something that we need to consider and need to think about for yourself and for your loved ones. Next slide. So why do you need one? It protects your autonomy. Dr. Walsh, would you maybe do the slide for me?
Sure. Why do you need an advance directive or a living will? as Dr. Maxey mentioned, protecting your autonomy. If you are unable to communicate, a living will ensures that your medical treatment aligns with your wishes. It helps avoid confusion or conflict among family members and doctors about what you would want. The second point is that it's a way of avoiding unwanted medical interventions. A living will can prevent unnecessary or unwanted treatments, such as being put on a ventilator or feeding tube when you are unlikely to recover. It helps ensure that only treatments that align with your values are given. If I can just stop for a moment on this one, Dr. Maxey.
Yes.
The point here about avoiding confusion or conflict among family members is just huge, because there are oftentimes family members with different feelings about the type of medical care that the doctors may recommend. There are family members who may have different faith lives or different religious beliefs or what have you. And so if you want to be the boss of you, making those decisions in advance, or making sure that the individual in your family who you feel aligns best with your beliefs, this is absolutely important, because if someone doesn't have that in place, these are the kinds of things that can tear families apart when they really don't agree on how things should proceed. So I guess we can go on to the next slide, Simon.
Before we do, I just wanted to double down on that one, and take it a step further. Because sometimes when an individual communicates with the person who they've put in charge what they want or don't want, that person can sometimes be viewed as like the bad guy if nobody else, if none of the other siblings or whoever it is, the folks who feel like they have some say in the matter, were aware, even if the person is doing exactly what was asked of them, as difficult as sometimes that may be, if the other people who feel like they should have a say, don't know, it can oftentimes put them in a weird position. So not only would I suggest that you communicate to whomever you're putting in charge, but also communicate to those other core family members. And we all know our family, right? You know who's going to feel like they have some say in the matter. And even if they're not the person in charge, they should still know what it was that you wanted, which will oftentimes help whoever is the so-called decision maker. That will also give them some support if they do find themselves in a position to have to make some tough choices. It's really hard when you feel like you're standing alone in those moments. And then the other thing I would also say is sometimes who you pick is certainly your choice who you pick, right? But you want to pick somebody who you think will actually do what you want them to do. So, for example, there was a period of time when my father, the directives that he wanted, I did not think were a good idea. But I made the pledge, right, that even though I don't think that's a good idea, as hard as it would be for me to do that, I would do that. And sometimes that may not be your spouse or the person who, who seems like the automatic decision maker. So think carefully on who do you think would be able to get past their personal feelings and be able to do what you want them to do.
Those are both excellent points. Dr. Hines, we taking the next slide. Next
Sure.
slide.
Why do you need advanced directives and living wills? In addition to what we've already discussed, reducing family burden. So making these decisions in advance relieves your loved ones from making tough medical choices on your behalf during an emotional or stressful time, and can prevent family disputes. Let's be clear, right? Nobody makes good decisions when you're upset, when you're sad, when you're grieving, when you're shocked, right? All of those things can come into play if you found yourself in any of the scenarios that Dr. Maxey just described, right? Completely out of the, not what we were expecting, and then bam, somebody is like, I need you to make a split decision about this scenario. What? Right? Like that's not ideal for anybody.
Right.
All right, thank you. Let's go to the next slide. So
I'll take Dr. Maxey.
go ahead.
Importance of advanced directives provides clear medical guidance. In the event you are incapacitated, healthcare providers and family members will have clear instructions about how to proceed with your care. Legal protection. Advanced directives are legally binding, so medical professionals are obligated to follow your wishes as outlined in your documents. Empowers you to make your wishes known. It's an opportunity for you to think carefully about your healthcare preferences and make decisions. These really emphasize what we have been talking about the last several minutes. These advanced directives, these instructions, that's such a clear word. Instruction means this is what you are supposed to do. And clarity is a wonderful word. And having clear instructions and the time to help folks put those instructions together or to put your feelings into words that are instructions is, as Dr. Hines just so importantly said, not when you're in a time of crisis. It's time to think about these things ahead of time. So making your wishes known in clear instructions and protecting folks legally and binding folks legally just really make a huge difference.
So let me make a comment there, Dr. Waltz. So I recently took a very good course in medical records. And they made the point that if you do not have a legally binding document, that it's up to the physician to make your ultimate decision. And that may or may not be what you want to do. And we do know, and I've seen, and probably all of us in medicine have seen, that people may decide that you don't need to be resuscitated, even though you're not in a vegetative state. So it's a matter of protection. So not only can it help you survive, but also can make you not suffer. It cuts both ways. So it's better for you to make the decision than to have anybody else make the decision for you without taking into account what you really think and believe. Let's go to the next slide.
Well, before we go, can I say two things about legal protection? Legally binding document does not have to be drafted by a lawyer, right? You
Good.
can make a legally binding document by writing your stuff down, signing your name to it, and then making sure that the appropriate people have it, i.e. the person who is your proxy, your primary care provider. Oftentimes the hospitals will ask you, do you have advanced directives or a living will, so that then they can put those things on file, but it does not require you to meet with a lawyer to do so. And in the chat, I put the link to what's called 5wishes.org. And it is a site that will kind of walk you through some of the steps and questions to ask yourself and your loved ones as it relates to these types of things. And the other thing I will just say about clear medical guidance is a lot of people make the assumption that it's an all or nothing. Either I want everything or I don't want, anything, right? And there's a whole lot of gray in between, and you can make directions that address the different scenarios that might give you pause, right? So there's a difference between if I've got terminal cancer versus if I was in a bad car accident versus if I got COVID. I might not want to do all of those. I might not have the same response for all those types of scenarios. You can write those types of instructions down and they are binding.
And it is also recommended that you have a witness, not necessarily a person you've chosen to be in charge of you, but you need an adult witness to co-sign with you is recommended. Let's go to the next slide. Want to do this, Dr. Walk?
The importance of advanced directives, components of an advanced directive. One, living will. Details specific medical treatments you wish to receive or avoid in the event of a terminal illness or irreversible coma. Example, quotes, if I am in a vegetative state and there's no reasonable hope of recovery, I do not want life-sustaining treatment. Example, component number 2, healthcare proxy or durable power of attorney for healthcare. This is a person you appoint to make healthcare decisions on your behalf if you are unable to do so. This person is often called a healthcare agent.
So it's very important the attitude and agreement of that healthcare agent. And you want that by someone who does not have a potential negative interest in you. I've always said that you don't want to be more valuable dead than you are alive. So it's very careful how you pick that person, that they can be objective and follow your wishes. Let's go to the next slide.
I will also add, while we're transitioning, that healthcare agent, that person not only is in charge of, like, some immediate decisions, but it is really challenging to get your insurance company to listen to that person if you don't have documents in place. It's hard to get some of the other people that are involved in your healthcare process, just beyond the clinical decision makers, if you don't have those documents in place. And I'm speaking from personal experience and that's with documents in place. It is very challenging to get people to talk to you, to get the transfer of information, to be able to get records about things that would help you make decisions about your loved one. So having those documents in place is really, really helpful, especially for the person who's trying to work on your behalf.
And Dr. Hines, I think that point is so important that this goes even further about transfer of property. If you don't have this in place, if you don't have a will in place, your transfer of property that you may own may go outside your family, may go into probate, may go to the state. And if you don't have any kind of document, any kind of living will or will, it's up to the state, and somebody can buy it for 10 cents and you got 20 or 30 acres or 50 acres down in Mississippi and it's out of your family. So those points he's making are very, very important. Let's go to the next slide. Did we do the do not resuscitate?
No, we did not.
Let's go back.
Please. Okay, the importance of advanced directives. Point number 3, do not resuscitate or DNR orders. Instructions for medical personnel about whether or not to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation or CPR if your heart stops beating. Number 4 is organ and tissue donation. A section to indicate if you want to donate your organs or tissues after death.
So let me comment on that. There was a story in the news last week, I believe, where a family had agreed that this patient should have organ donation. He was wheeled to the OR to do that, and he woke up and he said he didn't want to do it. They tried to take him anyway. This guy was ultimately discharged from the hospital and is healthy, alive, and well. But somebody wanted to get his organs. So that has to be clearly spelled out. So that'd be a very scary thing if you're on the way to the morgue and you wake up.
And Linda Hall posed the question of who makes the decision on whether or not a person is viable or is likely to come out of their, is in a persistent vegetative state, that type of thing. And she's commenting that it's a gray area. In general, as Dr. Maxey said, in the worst case scenario, if there was no one, let's say you were John Doe, right? And you are in what appears to be a persistent vegetative state, then usually like a hospital ethics committee, not a single individual, there would usually be like an ethics committee that would then, meet and gather up the facts and the information and decide, this is likely an irreversible condition, and then whatever the next steps are. In the event that you had, advanced directives or a loved one present, that type of thing, the information is then presented to that loved one, right? Again, to try to understand what's being said, especially if you're not medical or anything like that, and try to interpret what's being said to them when this person, the most common scenarios, we're talking about people who are presumed to have brain dead, right? They're brain dead. And you get this information that says, we've done these tests that probably have no meaning to you whatsoever and can sometimes be very difficult to watch your person go through. And then using that information, that is what is presented to the living family members and or representatives. And then they kind of decide what next steps we want to take or not take.
So let's talk about this for just a moment. Let's talk about the definition of death, brain death. So one of the things we used to use when I was in training, we look at the eye grounds, and you can see actually the stoppage of flow in the retinal blood vessels, and you can see that. But more importantly, you can do, so it's called an electroencephalogram, where you're detecting the presence of brain activity. If there's no brain activity, that is a definition of death. So it's very important. Now, many people can have severe brain damage from a stroke and yet recover. So you want to be sure to ask your doctor, the neurologist, or neurosurgeon, whoever, what are actually seeing on that EEG, and what are you declaring this patient dead? And tell me the reason why. Don't just take a doctor's word for it, make him explain it to you in common language. Very important. Very important. Any other comments on that? Next slide. Dr.
Okay,
Walker,
I'll take this one. How to create your own advance directive. Step one, assess your healthcare preferences. Think about your values and wishes. Would you want to be kept alive on a ventilator or through artificial feeding? How do you feel about organ donation? What would your end of life care look like? This is something a lot of folks don't really want to think about and have a difficult time talking about. But it is important to think about it, if not just for you because it's difficult and you don't want to think about it, but as we've been talking about the last several minutes, for your family members. This is a very difficult thing to think about for someone else when there has not been conversation about it. And leaving it up to the doctors who don't know you can be very challenging as well. So it's important to do this step one and think about it. What is your preference? What are your preferences, depending on the different scenarios that have been laid out?
So also in regard to what you're saying, normally, if the person is married, the next of kin and the person automatically in charge is the wife. Even if you're separated, but not legally divorced, the wife or the husband is in charge. In other circumstances, it can be the oldest child or the closest relative. So you need to have this clearly spelled out, who you wish to be in charge, and have an interest in what you say. And I've seen where it's not good to have your spouse in charge. And I've seen when it is good. So you have to be very careful and know what your life is and making these choices. Also, as Dr. Hines mentioned before, there are gradations in what treatments you want. For example, a full out resuscitate and keep alive can be very painful and uncomfortable. They can put a needle directly to your chest into your heart. They can put feeding tubes through your abdomen, and you may or may not want to do that. It's not a pretty sight. So you need to have an idea and discuss this with your doctor or healthcare provider. And the reason I gave an example of the two patients that I feel very bad about this week, one was very young, a kid, and one was a senior. So you can't ever tell who it's going to happen to, when it's going to happen. Life is uncertain, and tomorrow is not promised. So we all need to think about this. And I'm going to be visiting my documents first thing tomorrow morning. You never know. Next slide.
So how to create your own advanced directive continued. So step one, we just talked about, is think about it yourself. What is it you might want? Run through some scenarios in your mind. And then step two, talk with loved ones. Discuss your wishes with your family and your healthcare proxy. This helps ensure everyone understands your preferences. And I would just add to this one, discuss your wishes with your family. Discuss your thoughts with your family and your healthcare proxy. Maybe you don't know what your wishes are. Maybe having that second opinion from someone who you think would be able to help you make some determinations. So talk with loved ones about either what you want or what you think you may want, or about how uncertain you are about what you may want or may not want. And then step three, consult a lawyer or medical professional. While many states provide basic forms for living wills and healthcare proxies, it's a good idea to seek legal or medical advice, especially for more complex situations. And I will just say, if you have never talked to someone about what kinds of complex situations there can be in healthcare situations, there are so many things that nobody imagines until they see them. And then suddenly it is unreasonably sometimes complicated. So talking with folks, making this really an open conversation. It's kind of taboo in many families or cultures or communities to talk about this, but it's important.
And can I also just say, in that step two, talk with loved ones, it also should be talk and listen, right? Because you have to approach these conversations with empathy for, the person that you're talking to. Like, let's say you're the person saying what you want, right? The person that is receiving your information may or may not be ready to even deal with the thought of you not being there, right? Or you not being around. So their ability to hear what you're saying, especially when you're not saying, do everything possible under the sun, right? Because there's a space for that, and then there's sometimes not a space for that. And sometimes people, they're processing their own grief and trying to listen to you. The thought, what do you like? The thought of not having you around, like, of course you should want, everything possible known to man, right? Cut your head off and turn you into a robot if they had to. You're not going anywhere, right? That's a normal reaction for people to have, believe it or not, because they just don't want to consider, what things look like without you. And it means, one, give them the space to say all the ways that they love you, right? And then at the same time, hopefully they'll be able to also hear all of the ways that while you love them, these are the reasons why I want what I want, or I would like for these things to happen. These are my values, right? And oftentimes, for most people, once you put it in the context of, if I have my last days, I'd rather spend them doing, this, that, and the other than potentially being, in hospital bed for, 6 weeks at, giving people that frame of reference to understand where you're coming from oftentimes can help people get on board. But it may not be the first time, the second time, or even the third time, depending on the person in your all's relationship.
So
And
this is so important you bring up. I had a profession before I was a doctor. I won't tell you what it was, but it deals a lot with grief therapy. The whole reason we have funerals is not for the person who's dead, it's for the people who survive. And this is the beginning of the process of equilibrating. There's no way to get off this earth alive. And we have to start this process now. So it's very healthy for your family to be able to discuss these items ahead of time while everybody's rational and less emotional. And it's very important to do this. You're about to say something, Dr. Walks?
yeah, I was just going to say, Dr. Maxey, well, first of all, I was going to let you go on your first of all saying that somebody might be more valuable dead than alive, and then saying that sometimes the spouse is not the best one to put in charge. I'm gonna just leave that alone, Dr. Maxey. I don't know what you were trying to communicate, but uh, but my wife loves me. She would never, anyway. Seriously, you have to be willing to talk past the following statement. Oh, you will never be a burden. Because folks will sometimes say, well, I don't want to be a burden to anyone. And there's always someone who will say, oh, no, you will never be a burden. Yes, you can be. It is very difficult to watch someone transition slowly from a state of independent living to death. And it is absolutely a burden. It can be a burden financially for a lot of folks, and it can be a burden emotionally and even physically, going back and forth to wherever the person is, cleaning up after the person. So please understand that when someone does, as Dr. Hines said earlier, they take that chance to tell you how much they love you and how much they want you to be around, they're wrong. When they say that you will never be a burden, um, you can be in many different kinds of ways.
And Dr. Walls, let me address the spouse thing. There are many spouses that are fortunate, like you are in your relationship. There are many that are in the state of either legal separation or
I know.
emotional separation, and you do have to recognize that. That's what I meant by those statements.
I
And
know
then
you did.
I'll also go take it another direction. There are some spouses who love the other person so much that they
Mm,
just can't do it, right? They just can't. I just can't say it. I just can't do it. Even when it's what the other person wanted. I've seen that more than once.
yeah, yeah.
And I will also just say the word burden. Burden just means heavy load, right? And the acknowledgement that it can be, and to Dr. Walks's point, sometimes we can be a little bit naive about certain things, right? And for sure, right? Things can be a burden, and there's no shame in acknowledging that, because if you just say it's a heavy load, right? They have the same, the words have the same meaning, right? But they sound different. But for sure, there's this whole sandwich generation thing it's a whole lot of people carrying a heavier load.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Let's go to the next slide. Is this the next one?
This is the next one. Step 4, fill out the forms. Use your state's form or work with a lawyer to create a personalized plan. Um, I know this is not a confession, but I will confess that I have had the forms for a long time. Fill out the forms, because I just say, well, I'll get to it, because today is not an emergency. Got up this morning, got dressed all by myself, drove to church, and I was able to understand and listen and get back home. And so it doesn't feel like an urgent need for me to get these forms filled out. Uh, my wife's forms are filled out and complete, and the lawyer's paid, and it's all done. And I'm not the one chosen to be the healthcare advocate and make those decisions, which is fine. But just getting the forms is not enough. And so I can't stress enough how important it is to fill out the state's form, work with the lawyer to make sure the forms are done properly. Create your personalized plans because we're all different. It's okay to be different. It's okay to want X and not Y. It's okay to do that. But if you don't go through steps 1, 2, and 3, then you get to this step and you're not sure what to put on the forms. So do this in the stepwise order that has been laid out. The key documents to consider, we've talked about already, living will, durable power of attorney for healthcare, and DNR orders, DNR meaning do not resuscitate orders if they're applicable.
And also, Dr. Walks, you don't always have to use a lawyer. They have legal services, legal shield, and things that you can do that are much cheaper than paying a few hundred, a few $1,000s for this. So find a way to do it. There are many different options you have. So it's not just $10,000 to get a plan.
Mhm.
Next slide.
Yep.
Two things. One, update and check on your plan and make sure that the people who you have identified are still the same people who you want, like, because their life circumstances may have changed. They may not be in the position. They may have passed on, right? You haven't looked at it in 10 years or whatever, and all of those things can all of those things can change. And then the other thing too is don't just have one copy, right? Your doctor's office needs to have it. Whatever hospital you normally need to, use needs to have it. The person who you put in charge needs to have a copy, because what I'm telling you, the people are be like, well, do you have a copy of the document? It was at his house and we haven't been able to get in his house. No one cares, right? So once you finish filling them out, give it to all the people that need to have it.
And the other thing I want to stress, you bring this to mind, make sure your family knows your address, your apartment number, your house number, where you live, your phone number. Somebody has to be able to get to you in an emergency. It's very important that you have to have some trust in somebody that you love and related to so much. Next slide.
And let me add while we're switching slides, Dr. Maxey, I have a friend who lives alone and is a senior person, and he has someone in his family that has a key to his place. Um, one of his children has a key to his place, and so you don't necessarily have to have the police come and break the door down. Someone can go and check on you. So just think this. A lot of this comes under the heading of think ahead. I have a friend who fell in their home, and it wasn't a life-threatening fall, but it was a debilitating fall. And so no one could come and help that person, and they couldn't get to the phone. And just in case nobody really thinks about this, it's great to have someone come and break your door down to check on you. They don't fix it. That's another expense after they break the door down and find out that you're okay or that you get the help that you needed.
Very good, Dr. Brooks. I'll
All
fix
right.
your door. I'll fix your
Oh,
door.
you gonna come by and fix the door, Dr. Maxey? Okay. All right, step 5, sign the documents and have them witnessed. Most states require that the document be signed in the presence of witnesses, and some states also require notarization. Okay, ensure you have at least 2 adult witnesses who are not related to you or involved in your healthcare. I didn't know that was needed, but okay.
Next slide.
All right, how to create your own advanced directive. 1, distribute copies. Oh, step 6, I'm sorry. Step 6, distribute copies. Share copies. Dr. Hines just covered this with enthusiasm. Share copies of your completed advanced directive with your doctor, your healthcare proxy, your family members, your hospital or healthcare facility if you're receiving care. I could repeat this 18 times. It is so important that you do this.
Let's go to
Next
the
slide.
next line. Dr. Hines, you want to do this one?
Sure. Some common myths about advanced directives. Myth number 1. I don't need an advanced directive because I'm healthy. In reality, unexpected health crises can occur at any time, even if you're in good health, and having an advanced directive ensures your wishes are respected in an emergency. Case in point, COVID, right? How many people who found themselves hospitalized and unable to speak for themselves, during the COVID, the height of the COVID crisis, could have used some advanced directives to tell people what they wanted and didn't want. Myth number 2, my family knows what I want, so I don't need a formal document. In reality, even if your family knows your wishes, having a written document removes ambiguity and ensures legal clarity, and also will likely allow others to act on the information being provided by your family. Because without the proper documentation, we could all be in agreement, but other people may feel like their hands are tied because they don't have the proper supporting documentation.
Okay, can I just go back up to myth number 1? I don't need an advanced directive because I'm healthy. I will just respond to that by saying, you don't know. We can have all of the tests run that you can imagine someone will run, and you don't know that there is a big blood vessel someplace that's just about to give up, that's just about to burst. You don't know. Healthy people die. I had a cousin that died of a stroke at 31 with no health problems. You don't know. So anyone who says to you, I don't need to do this because I'm healthy, they really don't know.
Next slide.
Myth number 3, I can change my mind later. I might change my mind later, so there's no need to do this now. In reality, yes, you can revise or revoke your advance directive at any time as long as you are mentally capable. It's always better to have something in place than nothing at all. And I don't know, that's pretty self-explanatory. So yes, you can write something now and then change it later if, your awareness changes later. As I said to you guys before, my dad at one point wanted his plan I didn't necessarily agree with. Over time, as his situation changed and as he saw things happen to other friends and family members, his position changed on what he would and would not want to have done. So yes, you can change your mind.
Very good. Next slide.
Where to keep your advance directives. Keep a copy in your medical file. So your doctor and hospital should have a copy of your advance directive on file. And if you have been to the doctor or hospital recently, it is a standard part of part of your intake process now. People are asking you, and they're asking you regularly. It's one of the Medicare quality measures. So you are being asked about it regularly, and sometimes that makes people get numb to the question. But if you haven't done this step, go ahead and take this step. And then 2, give copies to your healthcare proxy and family. And again, this is just so, like we said, they know where they can find that supporting information on hand. And the joy of life now is that digital, right? So digital information, that way it's doesn't have to be just physically located in one place. You can share that PDF, and then whoever can have it on hand.
Okay, I think we're at the end and we're at the top of the hour. So this year, we're real close to Christmas, and a lot of people are going to get together for family dinners and gatherings on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. It might be a time to have this discussion while loved ones are around. And if anybody wants a copy of these slides, if you send me to my number, which I'm going to give, which is 310 849 4331. And Simon, if you put that in the chat, I will send you a copy of this talk if it will help you in meeting with your family. And let's open the mic for a few minutes if anybody has any comments or questions of what we've just spoken about. But I think we've had a pretty good discussion on this. Any comments, questions anybody may have? Anything in the chat, Dr. Walks?
I think Dr. Hines has been good about putting things in the chat and looking at what came up in the chat. So I think we're good. I think that there's a thank you in the chat, and I think maybe it's a thank you, Dr. Maxey, for bringing up this very cheerful holiday related subject a couple of days before Christmas.
Well, you'll be cheerful if you get it done and gives peace of mind to the
I
family.
need to get mine done, man. And you know, really, seriously, it is important. You guys know I joke about almost everything, and as a psychiatrist, I've had to deal with folks that have really struggled when these things have not been done, and families literally have been torn apart by the kinds of things that we're trying to avoid by Dr. Maxey putting this together for us. So there you go.
All right, well, let's have final comments, starting with Dr. Hines and then Dr. Walks.
So I put in the chat, like I said, the link to www.5wishes.org. It is a very, I think.
Something happened to your audio, Dr. Hines? Is it just me? Can't hear you as well as I could a few minutes ago.
I can lean forward. Is that better?
Okay. Yes.
So I put in the chat, there's a link to the 5 Wishes, www.5wishes.org. And it walks you through a lot of these things, including how to have some of these conversations with your family members. And then I will also just say, again, my point about empathy, you know, on both sides of the table. I am the healthcare proxy for my father, and I can remember I sat with his advanced directive DNR form for a couple weeks because it was just hard to sign, right? I knew the answer. I knew what I was supposed to do. I just had a hard time. That's where we are, right? And I got it done. But that's where I say just be empathetic with yourselves and with the others who are involved in your process.
Thank you so much. Dr. Walks?
I'd like to say, Dr. Maxey, that there's really never a great time to handle things that are difficult. And so when we are busy waiting for the right time, or we want to get past this or get past that, it can just be a matter of just kicking it down the street. And then the time that we need to get stuff done goes by and things are just harder. There's almost nothing that should be done now that doesn't get harder as you leave it alone and try to do it later. So I appreciate us being able to have this conversation. A lot of the comments in the chat have to do with folks appreciating this very difficult topic being brought up, and folks agreeing with the urgency of getting it done. So once again, Dr. Maxey, your leadership and your bravery in bringing up things like this really matter. And I'm still in the Christmas spirit. I'm still gonna go put my Jackson 5 Christmas album on. I'm still gonna sit up and wait for Santa. So you're not messing up my Christmas.
Yeah, I like Donny Hathaway's Christmas album.
Absolutely.
So, Simon, would you put my phone number and email in the chat so people can forward to me their request, and I'll get this document out if it can be helpful. And I want to appreciate my co-moderators, Dr. Hines, beautiful young doctor, smart, head of the family practice people in all of Maryland. I'm so proud of you. And Dr. Walks, who's my personal psychiatrist, who gives me my Thorazine. And Dr. Barbara Neighbor-Stevens, who's a pediatrician who takes care of me despite my being 200 years old. And my nephew Simon, who makes this show work. We thank you for this, and Happy New Year. Merry Christmas, everybody. Have a great, great day.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.